Today on the I Have Power podcast, it's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Ryan Williamson to the show. And we were connected through a mutual friend, Amber Vilhauer, who's also been a guest on the show in the past. And I would recommend you, if you haven't seen our episode where we had a great talk, I would recommend and refer you to that episode. Ryan has been connected through her, and so have I. And she thought we would get along well together and provided the introduction. So we followed up on that, and she was, again, of course, not wrong. Ryan and I get to chance to talk about his area of expertise. He's a neurologist and understands a lot of the workings of the brain. He's working on a book that's going to be out next year. He's got a lot of resources that we'll share with you. If you like and want more of what he shares with us today, get ready because it's like drinking from the fire hose. He really is knowledgeable, is brilliant, and articulate, and bookmark this episode for future reference. Let me just tell you that. So let's get into it and help me welcome Ryan Williamson to the show. Welcome to the Eye of Power podcast. I'm your host, Tom Dardick. But this podcast is not about me. It's about you and your power. It's time to claim yours. And so you just got to Atlanta. Was there a particular kind of thing that prompted Atlanta?
Yeah, great question. So a handful of reasons, really. We have some family that are close by. We were
That
just
always helps.
right. So we've got some. Actually, funny enough, I kid you not, this is like my fourth night home, and we were walking to grab some barbecue down the street, and my cousin comes strolling up the sidewalk
Ah,
to go pick up our nephew, and like had not communicated. I mean, that's the kind of place this is. We're like, holy cow. So
signals that you are in the proper place.
exactly.
Yeah.
We missed doing the big city thing. I did my residency in Washington, D.C. So we were in a kind of a big city environment like that for 4 years.
Okay.
And we really enjoyed being able to walk to things and have access to better restaurants and just more stuff to do. And we've been pretty rural for the last 5 or 6 years. I was stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina from 2018 to 22, which we
Okay.
could
Through
go
COVID,
through COVID. Yes, that was an adventure.
I bet.
All. So we were kind of rural Eastern North Carolina for a period of time. And when I got out of the service in 22, we stayed there because we actually love coastal Carolina. It's beautiful.
It is.
But still, I mean, the closest target was like a 45-minute drive to Wilmington. So, I mean, the little things you take for granted,
Right.
some nice natural beauty around, but we can walk to stuff here. And we do have a cabin in Blue Ridge, Georgia, which is about like door to door. It's like an hour and a half, and you're just in a totally different landscape, which is really
Right.
nice.
Yeah.
International flights or direct flights all over the place. We do a lot of work with Amber Vilhauer, who obviously we're connected through. We meet in Austin for a lot of that, so just made a lot of sense to be here for a lot of reasons.
All right, well, let's dive into it. So why don't we kind of do a quick sort of origin story, Ryan, of how you got to the place you are on your professional journey, and we'll just take it from there.
Sure. So I grew up in Tampa, Florida, and
My
throughout.
daughter, my daughter, well, she's in Gainesville, but her husband was in Tampa, so she was just down. We were just down there over Christmas. So
Oh, wonderful,
yeah.
wonderful. What part of Tampa?
Well, he was stationed at MacDill, so his apartment was right near MacDill Air Force Base.
Yeah, that's great. That's 10 minutes from where I grew up. And my father-in-law was 21 years retired Air Force, and he was at MacDill for a good part of his career. Uh,
Wow,
so very, very familiar with the area.
there you go.
Grew up there, and this is a common story for physicians, but I really endured a lot of loss as a kid. Had a lot of family members that died when I was pretty young, and
Yeah.
that was pretty difficult and traumatic, which I didn't fully understand at the time. And that's part of what Amber and I sort of uncovered through my alignment process with her program. But in either case, it got enough gears turning early to make me want to go into medicine. And this is a common story among providers, whether nurses, nurse practitioners, doctors, whatever. That's, people get exposed to some sort of personal grief, trauma, loss, feel called to go into medicine. That was absolutely the case for me. And for sure, by the time I was a senior in high school, I knew I wanted to go be a doctor and dedicated my life to doing that. And as I start going through the training pipeline, thinking I'm going to help and, maybe save all these people, you realize as you get through medical school, you're not going to save everybody. I mean, everybody
Mm.
dies. That's inevitable. And go
It's one
through.
of those lessons that sometimes it's hard to swallow.
Right, right. Life so far is finite. Science may be challenging that in the future years, which we could get into. But in
It's
either
fun.
case,
This is just a little aside that's maybe neither here nor there, but I was just listening to a Rush song. I think it's called Dreamland or something like that. And the lyric is learning that we're only immortal for a limited time.
right. Well,
Yeah.
well said.
Yeah. Neil Peart. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, so that was, I suppose a letdown in a way, but then I decided to go become a neurologist. So that's my formal training. I'm a brain doctor by training, and the joke among other medical specialists is that neurologists just kind of diagnose things and don't really do a whole lot, because we come up with big names for these complex diseases, and like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and strokes and all this stuff, and when you're my experience is that when I was in training, you're so busy learning how all this stuff works and how to treat it acutely that I didn't have the time to zoom out to the high view or the 30,000 foot view and say, what's really driving all of this? Because when you really look at all these medications that are FDA approved to treat Alzheimer's or to treat Parkinson's, I don't really do a whole lot. And the problem is, but at least I think this is where the science is headed, is because by the time we get to that point where the brain has lost enough of these neurons or brain cells in a particular area, that turns on a series of events that effectively is irreversible. Now,
Mm.
that's pretty late stage disease, and that sounds really awful and miserable. And those are a lot of the people that make their way into my clinic or the hospital. And it took me time to kind of figure out, like, why am I seeing all the same people come in over and over again with all these same problems? And it's really defeating. Well, if you rewind the clock 10, 20, 30 years, maybe more, when we look at the underlying changes happening in the brain, the same things are going on between you and me and everybody else, but they haven't reached a critical threshold where symptoms show up. And by the time the symptoms show up, many times it can be too late, or at least the reversibility, if you will, is less. So I started thinking, all right, how can I, A, help more people, but B, help people earlier when it's time to correct course, when there's actually something you can do about it. Meaning, it's not just the 95-year-old that can't remember their spouse or their children and can't function. That it may be too late for that person, at least in modern science. I mean, there might be a cure for that at some point, but really the target is prevention. And so that's what got my gears turning and thinking, how can I reach more people? How can we do more of the preventive medicine thing? And you've got to zoom out again, because even though I think Western medicine and Western medical training has its attributes and it is life saving. I mean, if you have, I don't know, acute appendicitis and the surgeon has to take out your appendix, that's life saving. If you need an antibiotic to treat a pneumonia or an infection, that's life saving. We've come a very long way in the last 100 years or so, and with regard to conditions like that. But as far as meaningfully prolonging life, and not just how long we live, but our health span, which is how long we are healthy, and Tom gets to tell everybody about the eye of power, and I get to go do my thing with Transcend Health and do the things we like to do, right? And go hang out with your kids in Tampa and Gainesville and wherever. So that's what's meaningful to people, and trying to hone in on how can we help people do more of that, is my idea behind this. And so I thought, well, if I can only see 10, 20, maybe 30 people a day in clinic or the hospital, maybe if I wrote a book, I could
Ah.
I could reach more people. And so that's when I reached out to Amber. And Amber and I know each other through Justin Donald's Lifestyle Investor Mastermind. I don't know. Are you familiar with Justin or any of the work he does?
Yeah, I just got a copy of his updated book. I had he signed his when it first came out, and then he uh, it's funny. That's the kind of guy he is, right? It's like I didn't know, I didn't pay, just here's the updated version. I mean, fantastic.
Justin is an incredible human being. I mean, he's just such a humble, generous guy who connects all kinds of people. I think that's, he talks a lot about investing. I mean, obviously lifestyle investor, but I've heard him say multiple times that, I'm pretty good at investing, or maybe better than average, but my big skill is connecting people. And the more that I'm around him, the more I believe that.
Yeah.
And so, as you know, Amber was involved in the launch of his business. And they've been friends, gosh, for I don't know, 20-ish years, I think, through Cutco. They're part of the whole Cutco mafia.
Right,
Which,
right.
by the way, if there was ever a paradigm for success and in sales trading and just how to go be successful at life, Cutco, I think, figured it out. I mean, when you look
I
at the
did that
odds,
one summer. I think it was like a college break summer. I did that, and so yeah, and it was well supported. So yeah,
so,
it's
so
funny.
even Tom has been part of the Cutco mafia at some
That's
point.
right.
There you go.
Little
Proof
tiny
the
bit,
point.
like a couple months, 2, 3 months. But
I did something clearly,
yeah,
or maybe it's you. And anyway, so in either case, Amber, I think officially joined the mastermind a year or so ago, man, plus or minus. I remember Justin, wrote a quick post about it. He's like, "Hey, my good friend Amber, part of the group. She does, books and business and all this stuff." And that was kind of in the back of my mind somewhere. But last June, I finally was like, all right, like I'm going to do this. I've been kicking this idea around for like 5 years. I'd outlined a book. It went nowhere. I had no clue what I was doing. The whole who, not how idea. If
yeah.
you're a fan of the Dan Sullivan, Benjamin Hardy, see the other guy that's in the PhD that is a psychologist. I think it's Ben Hardy, right? Um,
I don't know exactly, but it rings a bell.
I think, yeah, Dan Sullivan, strategic coach, and anyways, got
Yep.
this psychologist he pairs up with. But so I'm like, all right, got to go find the right people. So reach out to Amber and say, hey, this is what we've been thinking about doing. Really want to go help more people write this book. And that was June 7th of last year.
Okay.
And the dates are important here, which I'll get to. June 11th, Amber responds and says something like, I don't know if you believe in divine timing or not. She uses this word a lot,
Hmm.
but I just wrote a book, Infinite Impact, that addresses all of this. And I want to help. And what Amber didn't know is the day before, Tom, I got a phone call that my lifelong best friend died completely unexpectedly
Oh wow.
in his home. And I mean, it was like the worst thing I've ever dealt with. And so I emailed Amber back and I said, we're going to have to take a pause here. And here's what happened. And of course, she was super supportive and sent me a copy of Infinite Impact, sent me the exercise log. She's like, you take all the time you need, but when you're ready, let me know. And or if if you want to put a pause on the whole thing, whatever. And I said, no, I really need to do this. And if nothing else, I'm more motivated than ever to do this because there are no guarantees, right? I want to go help more people. And fortunately, my good friend Tanner was in good health. This was a total accident, but
Okay.
illustrated the point that life's just not guaranteed. I mean, we have these ideas, we have these, I'll get to those and I'll save that for later or my bucket list. That may never happen, right?
Yep.
So whatever the project is, whatever you want to do, just go do it. And that was what kept coming back to me. And I do, I mean, I've reflected on my purpose and obviously the conversation we are just having about how can I actually help people. And uh, anyway, so came back to Amber and turned in the log and she said, okay, you're ready. Let's go launch this thing. Let's go help you write the book. And in the meantime, how can we reach more people sooner? Because obviously it takes time to write a book, which is currently due to come out next fall. We're targeting September as a launch date. And so she came up with this idea, actually, kind of like what Justin does with this mastermind. And so with Transcend Health, which is our business, I now have a private coaching membership where I bring in anybody that wants to sit and listen to me talk about
Mhm.
how to live longer, how to increase their performance, how to understand the brain, and basically just how to get more out of life from the perspective of brain health first, stress reduction, improving your sleep. And we talk about all these different metrics and it's very data driven and that's something I've tried to be very clear with her about and clear to my audience about because you probably see this. I mean, I certainly get it on Instagram and X and all these places. The quote unquote longevity space has really exploded in the last 10 years, but really the last like 2 to 3. I've really just seen it, kind of really shoot wide open. And
Yeah, I've seen like Tony Robbins had his big thing 2 years ago or something. Like he had a book and a uh, program that came out, I think.
yes,
And I was going to ask you this earlier, so it now seems like a pertinent place. It seems from the an outside observer of the industry that brain science has been on a logarithmic sort of trajectory over maybe a couple decades. It seems like, and I'm curious as to what it looks like from your perspective, where 10 like we're doubling our knowledge like very quickly, and then it has all these repercussions or at least implications that are not filtered into our uh, thinking yet. And so avatars such as you that are helping people say, wait a minute, hold on a second. What you thought before, like one example I think you pointed to earlier, Ryan, is something like we used to think that, um, and correct me if I'm wrong, I could be speaking way out of turn, but like we used to think that neurons were just dead and died, and there's no plasticity, no ability. Something happens traumatic to the gray matter, and that's it. It's done. And so we learned that, wait a minute, hold on. So the brain has lots of different strategies it uses. And so things such as that, or dynamics such as that, I'm curious as to what your view of the trajectory of the science is, and maybe you could share some insights as to what you think people should know more of.
Absolutely. So you are 100% correct in that technology is on this logarithmic curve, and that does not just apply to neuroscience. That applies to technology broadly. And as technology develops, that informs better tools that then help drive the research in neuroscience. And so there are things. I mean, the joke when I got to medical school is, something like half or 90%, I forget what the actual number was, of what you learn in these 4 years is going to be wrong. And, in 5 or 10, I'm like, oh, what are we sitting here for? Why are you taking my money? Other
Exactly.
than it's expensive to go
You're,
to med
you're,
school.
you need to, you got to get organized. Like I took an AI mastery course last year. It like halfway through, the stuff they're teaching in the beginning was no longer necessary or needed. It was like it was being obsoleted as we went. It was crazy.
It's yes, and even and as strange as this might sound, as I'm writing my book, I'm coming across examples of things that are changing in real time, and I'm thinking, my gosh, I mean, I'm gonna have I do continually update things as we're as I'm going through the chapters, submitting it to editing and doing all this, and I've had a conversation with our team, like, I mean, how relevant is this going to be by the time we get to book launch? And they basically said, welcome to the dilemma of every author ever. But in either case, back to your question on the neuroscience, even when I was in residency, which is less than, well, I guess about a decade ago, I guess I started in 2014 to 2018 was when I was officially doing my neurology residency. When I graduated, there were things that were considered very just crazy talk that are mainstream now. One being like the gut brain axis, for example.
Mm.
I distinctly remember our chairman, who's a very accomplished neuroimmunologist, amazing person, great neurologist, great clinician. It's like, yeah, there are people that talk about the gut and the brain, but they're crazy. And now we know, or at least we think we know, that our microbes, believe it or not, are directly connected to the brain via this our 10th cranial nerve called the vagus nerve, and they produce peptides or proteins that serve as hormones that actually influence and drive behavior, which is super interesting. So we're
That's an amazing thing. And again, I don't want to go on a tangent, but there's a couple things you just kicked off I want to share. One thing is one book I'm reading right now is called Being Wrong, which is basically the recognition that most of what we think is not exactly correct in terms of what is empirically the reality out in the world. We have our own stories, and so we can be enslaved almost the more we learn, it seems so solid. So the very smartest, most accomplished people, such as the professor that you cited, they're most likely to be falling into these cognitive traps. So that's one thing. And the other thing I want to share is my youngest brother, Chris Stardick. He is a microbiologist, specifically plant virology and genetics with the USDA. And he and I wrote a novel together. And one of the things I learned from that is, and it kind of is part of the theme of the novel and sub theme, that we live in a microbial world. Like microbes are the world, and we just sort of, and like we are microbial beings. It's our idea of who we are is not quite doesn't quite match the world. So those two things together, I mean, we've got a lot of room for improvement in the models that we use to navigate. So keep going. I just want to share those two thoughts.
No, I'm on board with all of that. And to your point about the microbes, I mean, your bacteria and symbiotic organisms, so things that live on, around, and in you, outnumber us like 10 to 1 in terms of
Yeah.
actual cell count.
That
And
Chris taught me that, and I was just stunned. I would have never guessed that. And so we're not an individual. We are like we're a collective. We're a colony of cooperative, you know, individuals essentially. When you get right down to it.
That's exactly right. And not only that, but those same microbes help keep your skin healthy. They help keep your gut healthy. They help keep your immune system primed. And in fact, all these, I mean, again, antibiotics can be life-saving in the right application, but they're largely overprescribed for, just
Yeah.
a basic runny nose or something like that. And that wipes out, I mean, trillions of healthy cells that keep your immune system functioning. And so you have to rebuild that every time you go through a round of antibiotics or something like that. And that can be detrimental to people's health long term, because they don't just help the immune system. They like I said, they generate all these peptides and proteins. They generate a different molecule called short chain fatty acids that have a whole other variety of functions in the body. So um, very important.
I
Um,
think one frontier will be getting methods that are more targeted to specific microbes rather than just, right now, a shot of penicillin, just we'll get the bad ones and we don't care what good ones go along with. Get, in the future, maybe we'll be more targeted to the specific offenders.
Correct. And that's one area I'm very optimistic about the direction that medicine is headed on the technological front is having more personalized medicine. So,
Yeah.
when there are now programs, AI-based programs like DeepSeek and AlphaFold that can do. I mean, I'm not a computer scientist, so I'm probably going to completely butcher the timeline here, but what would take months and years and billions of dollars of research from a pharmaceutical company to manufacture one generic molecule that might bind well enough to enough people's receptors that A, it's safe, and B, it's effective, run it through an AI algorithm, and in a matter of minutes or days or something like that, it's got Tom's antibiotic, it's got Ryan's antibiotic, it's got the next person, so on and so forth. So we're starting to see that already, which is just mind blowing. Active so wearable.
It's almost it's almost analogous to like in manufacturing where uh, um, you used to have to make the thing. You'd have to make the mold. You'd have to draw it all out. You have to build it, then test the thing until you knew whether it was going to work or not. Then when you had computer modeling, you could actually make all the mistakes before you had to commit so much time and effort and resources to actually making the physical thing. That just meant, just it was a huge breakthrough with CAD and CNC and computer modeling in this physical space. And you're talking about doing this in the, I mean, it is physical, but it's chemical and it's at a micro level.
Correct, and it's safer, quite frankly, because
Yeah.
you minimize the error rate, and so you're not introducing a potentially harmful substance to patients that might have an adverse effect or outcome when it's even in the phase 2 or phase 3 clinical.
Well, that's one of those sort of bubbles that kind of is getting burst by, uh, I think we're taught, at least in the previous, maybe not the youngest generations, but my generation before, and perhaps even a younger or two, that we're taught to just trust doctors. Like, okay, the doctor
Mm.
knows, and it's like, yeah, the doctor knows more than you, but compared to what there is to know, he's like, he's got a flashlight and a big, huge cave. He doesn't really know that much, and so that's one of the benefits of the age we're in, where we're starting to see more of the corners of the cave.
Indeed, you're 100% correct, and that's I think I may have mentioned this earlier, but one of the issues with Western medicine is that our training is very siloed. So we go through that basic medical school, which is 4 years for United States students, and you learn the basics of how the body works. You learn the basics of what goes wrong with it, and that's when I teach my medical students and residents, I say if you're going to focus on one thing to really learn and just absolutely commit to memory and understand, it's anatomy and physiology, because
Mm.
that's the one thing that's probably not going to change substantially
Yeah.
in your lifetime. It's how we're built and then how our body systems work, because those evolve very slowly. Now we can manipulate those things with different drugs, and there are different viruses that show up like a COVID virus or something like that every now and then we've got to deal with. But in general, if you understand the system, you then understand how new pieces fit into that system, and that's where the technology obviously is rapidly taking off. We learn all this kind of this basic stuff, and then we go off and train and become neurologists and cardiologists and neurosurgeons and all these other things. But to your point about the doctor and the flashlight in the cave, most physicians in their specialty really only want to deal with a sliver of problems. And even still, I mean, take neurology, for example. I believe the number is 95 or 95% of adult neurology graduates, meaning somebody that goes through a 4-year neurology residency like I did. 95% of my peers or more go into a fellowship where they do another 1 or 2 years of subspecialty training where they just see multiple sclerosis, or they just treat strokes, or they just treat headaches. And that's within neurology. I mean, that's a very specific discipline or subspecialty or subdiscipline. And a lot of other specialties are like that. I mean, there are GI doctors that say, I only want to do this kind of scope. Like, I don't want to do these other things.
Well, that tells you, I think that is testament to the fact of how complicated everything is. One of the lines I mentioned, the novel that Chris and I wrote together, Sudden Onset. One of the lines that the heroine says is, life is inconveniently complex." You know, it's like,
Yes.
and that's a perfect example. We're talking about like some of the smartest people, right? So they're trying, and they recognize that, wait a minute, if I'm going to get really down this, I can't be spread so thin. I got to go just in this one place because it's just the mind goes so deep.
Correct. And again, that's I think the strength of Western medicine is that if you need the specialist for, I don't know, who's the best thumb or hand surgeon in the world, I mean, that person is probably somewhere in the United States, right? They will do the best possible job on that digit on that hand or whatever. But again, the more granular and the more nuanced we get, the less people see the big picture. And that's where I think we're starting to see a lot of providers zoom out and go, wait a minute. I mean, we have this obesity epidemic. We've got this, everybody's got this metabolic syndrome thing. And our, despite the fact that I believe we spend more money than any other country on the planet on healthcare, our outcomes rank us in like the 50s or something like that.
Yeah, something is not adding up there. We know that.
Correct. And that's where just returning to the basics, I think is a direction that we need to head as a society. And as technology is improving, that is informing, I believe, how that's done as we're seeing more personalized medicine. And go ahead.
Well, the question you just inspired, Ryan, was, just as a medical consumer, I thought, it seems like as we get more advanced, the more that the patient has to function as in the role of what used to be the general doctor. Like you have to be the one who's deciding what service to go, and it's there's a trap there, right? Because they don't have the educational background, and perhaps we're getting out of that mire through AI, where there's WebMD, right? I mean, I remember the first time I went to a clinic and I was talking to the whoever the practitioner was that came in and told the symptoms, and first thing they do, they're on their database. It's like, okay, I could go on WebMD too, right? That kind of
Right.
thing. And
Right.
that tool's only getting better and better and better.
Exactly. That's, I would say, at least since I've been practicing, the one maybe advantage that physicians have over a patient who's informed and has some tools like WebMD is context. And
Yes, yes. They've
WebMD,
seen other people. You don't have just
right,
your only your
right,
because you're reporting a symptom, the
exactly,
input, if and you could be ignorant about what the symptom actually is. You're just doing what your sensory uh,
right.
uh, perception is telling you. Whereas somebody who's experienced knows, okay, that's potential, but it could be these other five things too, and you're coming to
Correct.
right. Yeah. So
So, I mean, I truly can't tell you the amount of times that somebody has come to my clinic with a headache and they go, "Oh my gosh, I have a brain tumor," and
uh,
it's, I mean, it really, right, it raises anxiety for people. And I say, "Why? And why do you
yeah,
say that, or why would you think that?" And they say, "Well, because I googled it or I WebMD'd it, and it said brain tumor," and they immediately pulls up the worst possible outcome. And they
exactly.
go, well, considering headaches the number one complaint in primary care across the world, or whatever. I mean, maybe back pain might be above it, but it's one or two for sure. Probably just a headache. And anyway, but it
we
results.
have to laugh because otherwise we got to cry about it, because it is real. It is human pain, and it can trigger a negative kind of spiral. I mean, I went to it was a jeweler, like to change a watch battery, and he's like, "Yeah, I love YouTube." because people will, you get in, it's like, wait a minute, this is way more than I thought. You think you're going to be able to just watch a video and do it. So again, life is inconveniently, complicated. So,
Complex. You got it. You got
yeah.
it.
So okay, so again, I'm sorry I keep taking you off, but
No, this is fun.
well, it's such a wide thing. We're victims of the thing we're talking about, where we could go in so many different directions. But I do want to get down to the question that you were exploring about, from your area of expertise, what maybe two or three things that you wish more people were more cognizant of. And maybe that was a good example where your headache doesn't mean you have a brain tumor. So
No, that exactly. Yeah, really, I think there are four things that most people could do that would radically improve their performance, how they feel, their health span, like we talked about, and probably their lifespan or how long they live. And that would be to improve their sleep, to improve their nutrition, to improve their stress management, and to incorporate movement throughout their day.
Mm.
And that's it, Tom. And that sounds so simple, and it is, but I truly cannot overstate the benefits of each one of those when we break down the depth and the body of science behind each of those. And that's what I meant earlier when I said, I really try to approach this in an evidence-based fashion. Now, again, evidence changes as we learn how wrong we are, as we've been talking about. But when we look at the body of what appears to be quality evidence over time, these are basic things that really move the needle in terms of our individual health and how we feel based on how this impacts aging and our different body systems.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm happy to go through each one of those in as much detail as we
Well,
can.
well, I'd like to go to dive there. I think that's where sort of the gold vein of our current discussion probably is in there. And I just want to kind of say, I think most people sort of know these things, right? These are things that are in the zeitgeist of the world. Enough people are understanding and see this evidence that, but yet everyone knows it here, and this is what we do with the eye of power specifically. This kind of thing does not change behavior, right? Behaviors change through our emotion, right? Usually through relationships. So getting people to actually take the actions, the incremental daily actions that are going to lead to better results is not just telling them, right? They have to have the relation. They have to. It's an emotion. So we have to somehow tell stories and have relationships and get with people that want the best for us and all these sorts of things. So I say all that because like I give myself very good marks on 2, 3, and 4. I am not good on 1, and I know I should do better on sleep. And I know I could probably go through 12 things that I could do to improve, yet I don't really do them because I think I have this sort of basic, and I got it early, a basic view that sleep is wasting my time. And it's like,
Mm.
it's not true. I know that here, but I can't quite get it into here. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I 100%, Tom. And you and I are, this is where you, Amber, and I think, not I think, for sure, all align on this point, to use her terminology about being in alignment, is getting people clear on what's important to them. And that's the chapter one of my book, literally, is Find Your Why. And
Find your why. Yeah.
it's a discussion about purpose. And I walk people through a visualization exercise where I really try to help the reader get clear. And I do this with my Transcend Health members too, help people get clear on what is most important to you. Visualize yourself 20, 30 years from now, tomorrow, doesn't matter. When we go through all these different scenarios, are you a business owner? How does your business look? Are you married? Do you have children? What's your philanthropy? What do you love to do? What mark do you want to leave on the world? What kind of impact do you want to leave? What do you want your legacy to be? Which legacy I view as what you're doing every day, not something that's left after you're gone. It's the opportunity to wake up every day and go do the things that you want to do and make the world a better place, which I think deep down is what we all really want to do. So getting in touch with that deeper emotion, as you correctly stated, because, and here's some neuroscience, our limbic system that regulates our emotions are some of the deepest, most primitive structures in our brain, and they're the most deeply tied to memory. So to think of this in maybe a negative way, if you can think of a time you're ever really scared or had a really terrible experience, I mean, I don't know, dog chased you as a kid or something, or you had an embarrassing moment in your school years or something like that, you can almost remember every detail of that scene because that's how distinct that link is in your brain when it's formed in the limbic system and the deeper structures. Whereas our prefrontal cortex, which is, as you were pointing up here, that's the newest part of our cerebral cortex, which is the big part that sits on top that lets us think and abstract and build rockets and civilizations and all that stuff. That's really good for all of that and planning, but those two can be disconnected, and it's you've got to have it all lined up, as you said, to really get people motivated to change behavior. So future pacing people into what do you really want out of life, what's important to you, what's your purpose, what's your why, getting clear on that. And that way when you go back to the how and the what, like, oh geez, like I know I need to sleep better, you just reflect on your how, you reflect on your why, excuse me, and go, oh well, because I have the eye of power and I want to go help more people, and this is what I love to do, right? I've got my kids, I've got my business, I've got whatever it is. It's different for everybody. So that's part of the process and part of the alignment that we talk about. Which anyway.
Yeah, well, and I mean that was a lot of wisdom you just laid down there, Ryan. I very much appreciate. I think people listening to us uh, very much appreciate that. So let's go into it. So as your view on each one of those four, just a couple of we could talk. You could talk probably 2 hours on every single one of them.
Oh, sure.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yes. Yeah.
so what we really need to do is sort of just kind of get a little bit of the what you'd want people to retain in each one of those things that might move them in, starting with their why. Once they're sort of, look, I got to pay better attention to this and be connected to that, then maybe in each one of those, what's the why, perhaps the why in each one of those, in one of those four areas that they should really start considering to move in the right direction.
Absolutely. Well, starting with sleep, which is again, I think an easy one to pick up because we all sleep.
I'm listening. This is for me personally. I got to hear this better.
Sure. So, from an evolutionary perspective, why in the world would sleep be so conserved over millions of years? And not just in people, but most animals, most higher order animals experience sleep in some form. And it
I
takes
think of lions, like 22 hours a day or whatever it is.
sleep. Yeah, I don't actually. That's a great question. I don't know how long lions sleep. I should know. I should.
It's long. I know it's long. I know it's like crazy long.
Well, for humans, 7 to 9 hours within a 24-hour cycle seems to be optimal. Less than that increases the risk of dying soon. More than that actually increases the risk higher than less, which is really interesting.
Really,
But
that's interesting.
it is. Well, I think the presupposition there is that we're getting into more immobility, and there's some
Uh,
pre-existing conditions that people might have where they're not moving as much or as well. And so then they have other issues like diabetes, high blood pressure,
so
maybe.
there's health benefits of just being awake and moving and doing that. If you're crowding those out with sleep, you get the curve going the other way. Is that perhaps it?
I think that's part of it.
Okay.
Yes, yes, and correct. But in either case, there's a sweet spot in the middle, and that has been conserved for very important reasons. Sleep is the only time that we develop when we're actually growing through adolescence and becoming adult humans. It's the only time that your brain repairs itself. It's the only time your body repairs itself after exercise or injury. It helps regulate your immune system. It helps regulate your metabolism. It's the only time you form memories. I mean, it is a non-negotiable period of your day that is just as important as the top priority in whatever it is you're doing, whatever project or work or whatever. Sleep is non-negotiable. You have to do it. And so it's incredibly important. And there's some ways and some tricks that make sleep easier. One of the things I tell people is that good sleep starts in the morning, which seems a little counterintuitive, but it does. And when you wake up, you have our sleep is really regulated by two main processes. And I will try to not give my 2 hour version of this. I certainly can. So stop me if I'm going too
Okay.
deep.
I'm eating this up with a spoon. I mean, I don't want to stop you at all. Let's keep going.
Um, well, one of the main two processes that regulate sleep is something called your circadian rhythm, and people may have heard of that. But it is this cycle that's regulated by light. And when the sun comes up in the morning and light actually penetrates your eyelids, back to you actually had a great analogy with the cave earlier. Think of a caveman in a cave. There were no shades, there were no eye masks. There was just boop, sun's up, goes through your eyelids. It actually wakes you up. That actually starts a symphony or creates a symphony of these neurotransmitters that help tell your brain, hey, it's time to be alert, it's time to be awake. And as the sun goes down and light fades to the end of the day, it also signals the release of melatonin from your pineal gland, which helps you fall asleep. So there's a whole complex, I guess, series of events that happen in the brain that help keep that sleep cycle healthy. Yes,
So, can I ask a question on that? So, are we interrupting this with our relationship with screens?
you beat me to it.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry.
100%,
Okay.
100%. So, one of the best things you can do to help prime that circadian rhythm is to get somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes of early morning sunlight directly into your eyes. That might
Mm.
sound really crazy or scary or dangerous. If it's low angle sunlight, it's not. So you think when it's kind of orange red in the morning, when it's low in the sky, that's actually safe and actually beneficial because it's part of how we develop and how our brains work. And you'll need about 10 to 15 minutes, no sunglasses on, just kind of look in the general direction. So when my wife and I take our dogs for a walk in the morning, I try to intentionally face the sun for part of the walk to get that in my eyes to help wake me up. And believe it or not, Tom,
So,
yeah.
No, you go finish that.
No, I mean, it helps. I feel more alert, more awake throughout the day, and it actually improves my quality of sleep overnight when I do that regularly. And I mean, there's data behind this.
Well, I think everybody can probably relate to the satisfaction of watching a sunrise. And
Yes.
perhaps it's a deeper feeling than what meets the eye there.
So you would be correct in that regard too, and you beat me to the punch on number two.
I'm sorry.
Great. No, this is perfect. But you are expressing intuition around what the data shows, and so that's the light goes to. I can tell you the structures. It enters the retina, goes through your optic nerve, and then goes through a little relay center in your thalamus, which is a big relay center in the brain. Then it ends up in a place called the hypothalamus, and in particular an area called the supraoptic nucleus of the hypothalamus. So that's that light pathway that helps set the circadian rhythm, because your hypothalamus is like an autonomic pacemaker. However, there's another area of the brain called the habenula that's a little bit further to the back, and that actually helps regulate mood and emotion. So to your very point, when you do the same thing, you are also improving mood circuits, and it does result in you feeling better, and that is measurable over time as well. So you're 100% correct about both.
So that's an example of something I was thinking earlier when you laid out the four, the sleep, nutrition, stress, and movement. They're related to each other, right? So like
Yes.
one can help or hurt the other in lots of different combinations is where I bet you're going.
Yeah, yes, there's if you drew the not a Venn diagram, but the connections between all of them, it would look like a giant web, because you were
Yeah.
100% correct. These all influence one another, and it's so important. And when we look at the hallmarks of aging on a cellular level, which is how our bodies undergo it's aging essentially, so DNA repair and telomere damage and inflammation, all these other things, those all interrelate too, and these processes all talk to one another. So super interesting. So, but
So I have another question that's along this same line, which is, so the sunrise happens at different times. I've heard people, sleep experts, advice before where they say you should always get up at the same time. How would you square those things where it's either a moving target or you're disciplined to, in the clock? What's your view on that, Ryan?
correct. So sleep regularity, meaning the time you go to sleep and the time you wake up, appears to be more important or more powerful than sleep duration. So meaning if you were slightly sleep deprived, say you're getting 6 hours on average, again, not advisable, but just this is a kind of armchair example. If you're getting 6 hours on average, less than ideal, that might increase your all-cause mortality. But you were sleeping regularly, meaning you were going to bed at 10 p.m. every night and waking up at 4 a.m. or whatever that would be for 6 hours. That is likely better for you than getting, say, 8 or 9 hours, but going to bed at 10 p.m. one night, then you're staying up at 2 a.m. and you're advancing your sleep schedule, then you're going to bed at 8 p.m. the other night. So if your sleep schedule is all over the place, that is very disruptive to all these systems. I want people to think of their body as a symphony, because that's really how it works. I mean, it really is just a symphony of neurotransmitters and systems and hormones and what are called cytokines or signaling molecules that all communicate with one another to keep you optimally healthy. And that's just how we work. And the more natural we can keep those rhythms, the better your body works. Otherwise, it creates a lot of friction, for lack of a better term, and it causes systems to not function well. So
Mm.
for the example of people that live closer to the poles, where they experience more extreme, shorter days, longer days, depending on whether it's summer, winter, versus more or less equatorial dwelling people, where the days are fairly consistent. There are conditions that show up, like seasonal affective disorder, where people don't receive enough sunlight and actually experience symptoms of depression. And so there are devices that can generate the right kind of artificial light, which I haven't come back to ScreenJet in the evening time. But so red wavelength light or longer wavelength light in the morning can actually substantially help maintain that circadian rhythm and maintain mood. So that's a good workaround for people, and to help keep that sleep cycle regular. But as it happens slowly throughout the course of the year, the seasons, I would have to double check this, but to my knowledge, there's no substantial detrimental health effect, because it's happening so slowly as your body is cycling through that. I don't believe there's any major health issue or detriment there. One interesting example, though, of a cultural thing that's measurable that we all do is daylight savings time. Are you familiar with how detrimental this is to people's health?
No, I don't know where you're going with this. Let's hear
Yeah,
it.
this is so there. I think this is around 2013, 2014. There was a statewide study in Michigan that looked at. I was just reviewing this the other day, but I want to say it was like over 40,000. Don't quote me on this, but over 40,000 hospital admissions for acute heart attack throughout the state of Michigan. And what they found was there was about a 24% increase in the number of heart attacks the Monday after spring forward daylight savings time. So
Wow.
just by losing that extra hour of sleep, that created enough of a shift in everybody's autonomic system, meaning their blood pressure was higher, their stress hormones were higher, they weren't sleeping as well. There was an increase in inflammation in the body with these cytokines, all these different reasons that this would happen, but it meaningfully increased the rate of heart attack.
Now, in a stat like that, I'm thinking, wouldn't they be like that might have triggered it, but wouldn't they have been in danger all along? And maybe like the next week or month, they probably would have had the same problem anyway. In other words, is it really causation, or is it?
Great point. So,
You
yeah,
got what I didn't ask it very well, but you
yes.
got what
No,
I
no,
was
no, no,
going
no.
for.
Yeah, I'm following. So, which again, at some point we can dive into the metabolic issues too. But
Yeah, but
so,
I want to get your read
so if you
how
are,
big of an issue that is. Yeah.
when we look at the cohort of who would be affected by this, likely an older population with pre-existing risk factors, correct? So, we're not talking about in general healthy 22-year-old athletes that are coming in, right? This is maybe people in their 50s, 60s that have high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, they've got coronary artery disease, things like that. So there are pre-existing risk factors for people to come in anyway to be at risk for a heart attack, period. But the point being, it's really difficult to measure the effect of sleep regularity because we're all on different schedules. We live in different time zones. We all are flying to Austin at different times, or New York, or to wherever. And so some people are staying up partying, late, and other people are going to bed early and on time and waking up. So like as a society, it's just, we don't often have an opportunity to measure something like that produces a change that we could track. And so to
It's
see that at a state level is really interesting.
it's even hard for an individual to track themselves. It's like,
Of
how
course.
well do you know that you're what you're really doing? What you think you're
Yes.
doing and what you're really doing are not the same thing a lot of the time.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
The subjective and observer biases and all kinds of
Right.
biases that we have
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
are
So
really,
so
yeah,
quantification is our first complication.
correct.
Yeah.
And my only point is, not to bring up any, political reason for things to change or not change or whatever. It
Right.
illustrates the point that sleep regularity it seems to be very important. And there's data that backs that up.
So you're in favor of the ditching of daylight saving. That's going to have a benefit, more benefit than cost.
I think from a health perspective, net positive, I think that's
Okay.
unquestionable. Now, as far as cost and economics and whatever, that's all
Right, right.
to be
It's
here.
again,
So, yeah.
like the world life is inconveniently complex. Yeah. So, okay. So that's fantastic. I love out of the sleep area. The thing that really just popped out for me is think of your body as a symphony. In other words, it's working. And when you think of symphony, right, you have different sections, but they all have to be in harmony and in the same rhythm. And otherwise, the song sounds like crap.
You nailed
So
it. You
yeah,
nailed it.
so if you want it to be a beautiful symphony that it brings joy, or whatever emotions the symphony is for, we have to pay attention to those elements. So let's, and again, only this time because I keep going down this
Yes.
road, bro.
Sure.
Nutrition is something we talk about all the time, and the big broad brush strokes, of course, are stop eating the hot ultra processed, the they call it rancid oils, all the stuff that we know is very obviously not good for you,
Mhm.
right? So when I'm working in organizations, one of the first things I say is, look, nobody's trying to hurt the culture here. Very few. There are some people that have mental problems, but that's very rare, right? Most people, if they're contributing to a toxic element in an organization, it's because they don't know any better, right? They're doing the best they know how, and they just don't know what they're doing that causes harm. So what I say is we got to stop peeing in the pool, right?
That's a great
You don't
analogy.
know you're doing it, but
Right.
you still have to stop doing it. And so I think it's analogous to our what we ingest too. It's like we got to stop putting the stuff in there that is slowly but surely making our symphony go out of tune. And
Correct.
and so that's one thing. And then of course the other side of it is you got to give it what it needs. So and then that's different probably from people to people, place to place, and all that kind of thing. So what's your just broad brushstrokes along that backdrop, Ryan?
Yes. So I think diet has been very misinformed for people for a long time. The research seemed very conflicting, and then you end up with these kind of camps, for lack of a better term.
Right. You got like, oh, fats are bad. Oh, carbs are bad, or whatever. Yeah.
You've got carnivores and vegans
Yeah.
and vegetarians and Atkins and paleo and keto. I
Yeah.
mean, like on and on and on, right?
Yeah.
So in general, take a step back and look at what does the data tell us. In general, a whole food, plant-based, and or Mediterranean style diet seems to have the lowest risk all-cause mortality across the board, period. Now, again, when I talk with my Transcend Health members and other people about how to form a nutrition plan, first off, I really detest the word diet because diet seems limiting and restrictive. And
Yeah.
people, when they go on a diet, they limit themselves for a period of time to maybe lose some weight, even if it's not the right kind of weight. And when I say that, I mean they're losing fat, or they're losing muscle, not fat, which is muscle is very metabolically active, and that's what we need to build more of, hence the movement part. All this is interrelated, as we said.
Sure.
So this has to be individualized. It has to be sustainable, has to be congruent with your why. So there is some nuance there because obviously there are allergies, there are food preferences, there are
Yeah.
intolerances, there are things that people, personal goals. Are you a bodybuilder or, are you trying to lose weight? I mean, it's very nuanced, but in general, like I said, whole food, plant-based, Mediterranean, that's kind of the general broad brushstrokes. And then from there, being mindful of how much we're taking in
Mm.
versus how much we're burning. And we don't hear that talked about a lot. I've referenced this just in passing a couple times here, but according to this NHANES data, 93% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. And what that means is that we're overweight, our blood pressure is too high, our fasting blood sugar is too high, there are too many fats in the bloodstream, and we've got too much inflammation that can lead to clots like those heart attacks, people waking up after daylight savings time. So that's some those are the people that are at risk for having a heart attack, to answer your question, not just the average person. But in reality, 93% of people, 90% of adult Americans have at least one of those things, if not multiple of them, which is very alarming. And a lot of that has to do with what you mentioned about the food supply. It's processed, it's very calorically dense, but it's not nutrient dense. So we talk about macronutrients, those are proteins, fats, carbohydrates. Those are all important because those become building blocks, or they're stored, or they're burned as energy, and they can be converted from one another. But the micronutrients, so these little cofactors and vitamins and minerals that are essential to our body's functioning, a lot of that food supply has been stripped of those and replaced with synthetic additives that just add up and gunk up the system, interrupt the symphony, so to speak. And that's a real problem. And look back a few decades, I mean, obesity was not really a problem. And
Oh.
now more people are dying of chronic disease as a result of being overnourished or just being too obese, essentially, which, I mean, we can go down this rabbit hole too. But unfortunately, I think talking about people being overweight has become a bit of a sensitive or a taboo subject. And again, I think that's doing a disservice to people at large, because it's not identifying the problem. I mean, if we can't talk about obesity, how can we fix it? And it doesn't mean to shame people. It doesn't mean, I don't mean any of that. I'm interested in getting people feeling better and doing what they want and living longer. And we know that being overweight is a massive risk factor for a ton of these chronic diseases that cut life short. And we have to talk about it.
Well, I have experience with a couple years back. I went to a nutritionist, and your health care plan doesn't pay for it. You got to pay for this out of pocket. So now, if you don't have enough disposable income, right now the health system is not keeping you healthy in this way, where you can go get a screen, can look at all the various indicators, and make appropriate adjustments. And some of it's sort of just like any science, it's trial and error because you don't exactly know. So you do elimination of this, elimination of that, see what happens, retest. That's basically, it seems to me, like the state of the art now to get to an optimal diet. And those who have the means, can do that. But that precludes a lot of people because it's expensive, and the nutritious food tends to be more expensive than the stuff that's highly processed and made at scale. I remember, and again, I don't want to get political either, but I happened to see a presentation where two bags of Fruit Loops. One is the American version, one's the Canadian version. And the Canadian version wasn't as brightly colored. You still could tell the difference between the flavors. You could see that purple was purple and the green was, but I mean, it looked like The American version was like neon. It was like glowing practically by comparison. And the presenter said that, there's 10,000 chemicals that you can use in America that you can't use in most other countries. And some of them are like to make that color, to make it so that it looks fantastic. Our eyes are drawn to it. Our eyes are connected to our, you know, our appetite, right? So all these things, right? So what's your view of those sorts of things, Ryan?
So companies, hi again, not to, I'll try to keep politics out of this as much
Yeah,
as
I mean,
I
we
can
got to, like you said, we
do.
got to talk about what's
Yeah,
real.
right. Um, uh, so yes, these companies hire food scientists to engineer foods to appeal to that more primitive drive. So that same limbic system has reward centers built in, namely the dopamine system is a big one to incentivize behavior, and that's actually dopamine's intimately part of the addiction cycle. And so when you eat a processed food that has a lot of sugar in it, that triggers this dopamine, that reward system, and it leaves you wanting more and more and more. So it's really easy to burn through a bag of Doritos or Fruit Loops or whatever, but it's really hard to like overeat a salad. I mean, when you have a nutritious filling salad, I mean, I just had a great salad before we jumped on the call here. That's like my first meal of the day.
Is
I
it okay?
practiced a little bit of intermittent fasting where I delay my first meal for a few hours. I tend to skip breakfast, which is a shame because I love breakfast. I'll table that, but
I do the same. I do the same. I generally skip breakfast because of intermittent fasting, but keep going.
but my point is the salad that I have is packed full of micronutrients and fiber. It does have some carbohydrates, but I put some healthy fats on there like extra virgin olive oil. So I'm very satiated, along with some protein and fiber that I'll do as like a yogurt bowl or like have some protein or something like that as a side to maintain muscle mass. But I mean, I'm full for hours after that, and I feel great. And I don't have this sugar spike and crash that's leaving me wanting more and more. And I can't. I mean, I'm not going to go burn through the whole bag of salad because that doesn't activate those centers in the brain.
Right.
Number one. Number two, all of these synthetic additives, the processed chemicals, the food coloring, the food dyes. There's for sure animal data that there are some dyes like red 40 is one of them, I believe, that has caused an increase of certain types of cancer in animals. I don't know that there's human data yet. I mean, for obvious reasons, we wouldn't do a randomized controlled trial where we would hypothesize that something might cause cancer, give it to patient A and not give it to patient B and see what happens.
Right. That makes it morally challenging.
Right. However, again, back to that whole food, plant-based and or Mediterranean style diet. That is when I say that is free of additives, that is free of processed ingredients, that's free of artificial, added sugars and food colorings and all these other things. So I think that is very much part of the problem because those foods are easier to overconsume. Therefore, we end up in that overfed state without a massive amount of exercise or movement, which again is our fourth pillar to offset that, to be
Right.
in that energy balance. It's just hard. I mean, these foods are engineered to make you eat more of them, which makes you go buy more. So that's why the food companies have the scientists to help engineer the foods for profit because it is profitable.
Yep.
And to your point, because they can be manufactured at scale, they are cheaper and they're therefore the easier choice, unfortunately, for many people. So I really think there needs to be a culture shift and recognizing that, and as soon as we can, get the market to follow suit. I mean, I don't know if you believe in the whole invisible hand thing or free market or whatever, but and I'm very quickly outside
Well,
my sphere here, but
well, it's interesting. And again, man, our conversation could go in so many ways. But but like again, I mentioned my brother Chris. He's where I get a lot of that experience of writing that book with him. That taught me what I know about this area. And one thing that he teaches me is like markets with our food. He says, like Americans, because they try actually. So we don't want to vilify the food suppliers because they're just people. They're not trying to do anything bad to people. But the problem is if you don't have a big healthy looking, brightly colored apple or orange or banana, if it doesn't look on its exterior, you know, like magazine quality, and you have one that's more flavorful, more nutritious, more less preserved, all the stuff that we're pointing to, people are going to pick the nicer looking one. They're not going to pick up the the other one. So the market doesn't really get a chance to function in the way that it needs to in this way. That's why the regulations in some of the other countries where you just can't. do, and he does genetic engineering. So he's not saying all GMOs are bad. He's just saying that we don't get a clear view. So the market can only function to the degree that it has visibility. And so I think that's probably what RFK is going to try to do in the, we're talking right now as we're recording this in the very beginning of 2025, where the new administration and a new RFK is, his stated mission is to address what we're talking about. And we know it's a big ship, and we don't know how much he's going to be able to steer it, but we know at least that he's going to try to steer it in the direction we're talking about. So we'll see what happens. But other countries have set the way, so it's not like we don't have anything to compare against.
Right. I certainly hope you are correct in the current shift with the current administration that we're going to see that. I'm very hopeful that that's going to move things in the right direction.
There's powerful special interests on all sides, and we'll have to see how it shakes out.
Of
But
course.
what we're doing is where the battle really is. It's in the individual, like what you are going to do as a person, right? That's where the power is. That's really what we're talking about here.
Correct. And to that very point, I think that's, that's where education is so important. And that's part of what I aim to do with people on my platform is to genuinely just educate people on what their options are, how they get to give kind of an operating manual to, this is how your brain works. This is how the body works. These are your
Yeah.
predispositions, how you're wired.
Well, it sounds to me like those listening and want more might look into Transcendent Health, the
Yeah. Transcend Health is is our
Transcend
brand.
Health.
Yes.
I don't know what your capacity is there, but how would people find out more about that, Ryan?
Yes. So we have a website, so transcendhealthgroup.com, which I believe may have a link for that.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the description for sure.
Perfect. We're on social media, so we have an Instagram, we have a Facebook. So I'm Dr. Ryan Williamson on my personal Instagram, which is public, when I try to post stories and videos and updates. We have a Transcend Health Instagram too, where I share different tips on sleep and nutrition, movement. I mean, all these things that we've talked about. And obviously, I have the website. As I mentioned, we have the book coming out this fall, which will be again a brain health focused in-depth look at all of this, right? From finding your why, your purpose in life, figuring out what's important, and then incorporating all of these different strategies into your life to just go do more of what you love. I mean, that's the whole idea behind this.
Well, that's where we get to the one we didn't dive into so much yet, is the stress piece, right? When you're engaged in what you're doing, and I think we're probably both passionate about this. Um, the little things, all the little things that contribute to our perceived stress, whether it be interpersonal dynamics or a sense that we're not on the right path, or that our life should be something that it's not, or all, whatever it might be that's triggering our the bad stress, let's call it. Um, you know, that gets better if you get aligned with what you just pointed to.
That's exactly right. And we spend a lot of time in our membership too, which is the other arm. I guess two other arms of Transcend Health that we work with people on. So we have a monthly membership where I do Zoom calls just like this with our members. So we do, I focus on a given topic every 2 weeks. Let's see, 2 days ago it was wearables. So we didn't talk about this, but so I have no relationship to Oura Ring. I wear an Oura Ring to help track my sleep, to help track my exercise, my workouts, so on and so forth. But that has been massively helpful in shaping our members' behavior. And it doesn't have to be an Oura Ring. It could be Apple Watch or Galaxy Watch, Fitbit, Whoop, whatever. There are different products that fit this that help track your again, sleep, exercise, your heart rate variability, all these different things. We discuss that. And then I've actually had, as I'm writing the book, I've had a cohort. This has been a new thing that I didn't even know really was an option until we pulled our members and brought some people in. But as I was writing chapters of the book, I'm reading to a live audience on Zoom like this, and its feedback is informing the book content. So we've already gotten kind of a beta test read on book material, and people are bringing in their examples and their, I mean, just like, Tom could be in the book cohort and say, I really struggle with sleep, and like I get it, but I don't, it's not clicking here. So how do we get more of that into the book? How do we help people with that? So having a different age range and demographic of people from different walks of life, helping inform the content, I think is just going to make a better product for the readers.
That's
been really
fantastic.
fun.
I can't wait.
Yeah. So we just wrapped up cohort 1 last month, and the next one's going to kick off in early April. So if anybody's interested, they're welcome to apply and join for that. So we've got a lot of really fun things coming up that I am tremendously excited about.
That's awesome. Well, again, I feel like there's so much meat left on the bone here, and you know, we could probably do this 10 times in a row. Well, and if people want to, you just showed them how they can get more. So,
Absolutely.
Ryan, thank you so much. I've just very much enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better and picking your brain, and it's an impressive brain. And I guess we are sort of aligned. Most of what you said is just putting sort of firmament under what I kind of already thought. So it's kind of helping me get more resolve in the proper direction. And I hope it has the same effect for anybody who's listening to us. So thanks again.
Thank you, Tom. And I think you're right. And to really kind of put a punctuation on that or an exclamation on that, one of the reasons I've chosen to do this is that I've felt a shift in people. It seems like there are more people who are becoming more interested in taking better care of themselves. I think they're waking up to the system that we're sort of thrown into. And I think, and maybe COVID was the start of this for people, which is maybe the first time people really had the space to step away from the pace of life and go, oh my gosh, what am I really doing here? Maybe I get to work from home. I get some time off, time to just think, which I think is very important. Part of stress management, by the way, is to create time and space to think and process life, because I think a lot of people don't do that, and they're constantly just pinging around like a pinball in a machine from one crisis to another.
Really easy to do.
Very easy to do. But having the time and the space to reflect and go, oh my gosh, is this the best that life can offer? Is this the best I can do? I really have started to see that, and I'm very encouraged and inspired that people are thinking that way and really taking control of the reins themselves. And I want people to know that this is, I mean, 90% of this is within your control. This is not your health, your lifestyle. All of this is 70 to 90% of it is in your hands. It's not genetics. It's not predetermined. I mean, very rarely is that ever the case, but it's what you do every day that matters.
That is music to my ears. And I think that's a great way to wrap it up. So thank you so much. Very much appreciate this discussion, Ryan. Thanks for taking the time with us today.
Thank you, Tom. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to staying in touch.
Me too. I hope to see you in person next month.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I mean, I really can't wait. I hope you can make it. So we'll get to shake hands and hug there. I'm looking forward
That
to it.
sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks again, Ryan. I enjoyed every second of that conversation, and I look forward to more. I hope we are able to get together, and I feel like you're the kind of person that's just fantastic and healthy to be around. So people like that are absolute treasures. So um, thank you again, and I feel very blessed and honored that you were able to share some of the things I really, really loved. The fact that you're looking at the health span. We've talked a little bit about that before. Is we don't want to just stay alive and keep the husk going. We want to have a quality of life till the day that we call it quits, right? And so that's a goal that we can set ourselves up for. And Ryan said, 70 to 90% of the equation is something that is in our control. So that's worth paying attention to. The time is now, as far as, we talk about a legacy and we look down the future. Well, the legacy is today. The legacy is the thing that we're doing today. In the Eye of Power, we talk about SIAs, sustained incremental actions, the things we're doing on a regular basis, day to day. Small, doesn't look like much, but over time, it's everything. I think that was really good. I love the concept of the think of your body as a symphony. Using that imagery gives us a lot of power to be able to understand, does this fit in the music? If I was conducting, would I want this to be part of it, or perhaps not? And perhaps we can improve the day to day and moment to moment decisions that we make, the quality of those decisions when we think in terms of making beautiful music with our lives. So I think that's a very valuable image for us to take away today. So thanks again. Thanks for listening to us, and hope to see you soon and again on the Eye of Power podcast. This has been the Eye of Power podcast with Tom Dardick. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'd also like to thank my brother, Scott Dardick, for the music and his music production. If you'd like to reach me,
simply email Tom at dartecommunications.com.